The summer of 1964 settled over New York City like a thick wool blanket, heavy and suffocating. It was one of those long July heat waves where the air itself seemed to vibrate above the streets, bending the distance and blurring the skyline. In Harlem, the heat felt solid, like a weight pressing down on the body. It poured off the brick buildings, trapped between tight streets, turning the neighborhood into a furnace that never cooled. Fire hydrants were cracked open on almost every block, sending dirty streams of water across the pavement. Children ran through it, laughing and shouting, grabbing a few seconds of relief before the heat closed back in. Old men sat on brownstone stoops, slowly fanning themselves with folded newspapers, too tired to argue about baseball or politics. Women leaned out of open windows, watching the street below, hoping for a breeze that never arrived. On 118th Street, the heat mixed with the sharp smell of sawdust and fresh lumber. A storefront that had once been a rundown speakeasy was being torn apart and rebuilt from the inside out. Dust floated through the air, catching sunlight that slipped in through boarded windows. The space was loud and busy, but controlled. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stood in the middle of it all, calm in the chaos. He wore a cream-colored linen suit that somehow stayed clean despite the dirt and debris around him. A lit cigar rested between his teeth, smoke drifting upward and blending with the dust. He ran his hand over a stack of newly delivered wood, feeling the grain with care. "It needs to be finished by September," Bumpy said, his deep voice carrying through the hollow space. "That date doesn't move, Mr. Henderson. School starts. Then, these kids need somewhere to go after the bell rings. Somewhere that isn't the corner. Somewhere that isn't a pool hall." The contractor, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson, wiped his forehead with a rag already soaked in sweat. His shoulders sagged like a man carrying too much weight. Double quotes, "Mr. Johnson, I want to finish it," Henderson said. "I really do. This community center matters. It's a good thing." His voice tightened. "But my suppliers stopped extending credit yesterday. They've heard rumors. They know the money isn't coming from traditional sources." Bumpy looked at him. "They know it's coming from me." "Yes, sir," Henderson admitted, staring down at his boots. "And the lumberyard in Queens never liked extending credit. To Harlem projects anyway. Now they want cash up front for the flooring and the plumbing fixtures." He swallowed. "The supplier called this morning. Sighed nothing moves until he sees cash. No check, no pipe." Bumpy nodded slowly. He understood how it worked. In 1964, credit barely existed in Harlem. Banks refused to lend to black businesses, marking entire neighborhoods as risks. Suppliers charged extra just for crossing 110th Street, squeezing every dollar they could from people who already had little. It was a quiet chokehold meant to keep the neighborhood stuck in place. "How much to release the supplies?" Bumpy asked, removing the cigar and checking the ash. "Floors, pipes, fixtures, labor. Enough to get through the month." Henderson did the math in his head, eyes flicking nervously. $25,000, and that's cutting it close. $25,000. In 1964, that wasn't just money. It was a fortune. The cost of several homes. More than many men earned in 5 or 6 years of hard labor. Cash like that, on short notice, was impossible for almost anyone. Almost. "You'll have it today," Bumpy said. Henderson blinked. "Today, Mr. Johnson? The suppliers close at 4. It's already 1. Banks around here don't keep that kind of cash." "I said today," Bumpy replied calmly. "Have the trucks ready by 5. The money will be there." He turned and walked out, stepping from the dusty interior into the blinding afternoon heat. Outside, Junie Bird waited beside the black Lincoln Continental. He leaned against the fender, sweat soaking through his shirt, dabbing his neck with a handkerchief. When he saw Bumpy, he straightened and opened the back door. "We got trouble, boss?" Junie asked, noticing the set of Bumpy's jaw. "Henderson pushing back?" "No issue with Henderson," Bumpy said as he slid into the cool leather seat. "Just the usual system doing what it does. I need to go downtown. I need to move some money." "Downtown?" Junie frowned as he got behind the wheel. "You mean Midtown?" "Boss, you know I don't like it down there. Smells like expensive perfume and judgment. And the cops stare at this car like it's stolen." "Drive." Bumpy said, "First Sovereign Trust, 5th Avenue." Junie glanced in the mirror. "First Sovereign? Since when do we do business there?" "Since I kept some money clean," Bumpy replied. "Blue Ridge Realty. Legitimate profits. It's supposed to be safe, respectable, and available." He leaned back. "Today, we find out." The drive south felt like crossing into another world. As the Lincoln moved down the avenues, the streets changed fast. Harlem's noise, music, and crowded sidewalks faded behind them, replaced by something colder, quieter, and far less forgiving. They crossed the unseen but unbreakable line of 110th Street. Central Park slid past on their right, the city's wide green lung, and then the streets tightened and rose around them. Midtown Manhattan. Here, the sidewalks changed first from cracked and uneven concrete to smooth, carefully swept stone. The buildings followed, climbing higher and higher, towers of glass, steel, and pale limestone built to impress and intimidate. The people changed as well. The factory workers in worn shirts and the mothers in house dresses disappeared. In their place were men in gray flannel suits moving with purpose, and women in pearls and white gloves carrying shopping bags from Saks and Bergdorf's. This was a world shaped by money, order, and quiet exclusion. Junie eased the Lincoln, too. The curb in front of First Sovereign Trust. The building looked less like a bank and more like a monument. Its gray granite face loomed over the street, solid and cold. The doors were heavy bronze, polished until they reflected like mirrors. A uniformed guard stood outside, stiff and alert, like a palace sentry. "You want me to come in?" Junie asked, watching the guard carefully. "I can stand by the door. Make sure nobody gives you trouble." "No," Bumpy said. "It's just a withdrawal. I'll be 10 minutes. Keep the engine running. The air conditioning is the only thing keeping me civil today." He paused. "And Junie, don't stare the guard down. We're legitimate businessmen today." "Yes, boss," Junie muttered, though his eyes never left the guard. Bumpy checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He straightened his silk tie. He adjusted the brim of his fedora until it sat just right. He looked flawless. He looked like a man who belonged anywhere he decided to stand. He picked up his leather briefcase, stepped out onto 5th Avenue, and ignored the heat pressing against him. He climbed the stone steps and pushed through the revolving doors. The change was immediate. Traffic noise vanished, replaced by a quiet that felt almost sacred. The heavy heat was gone, replaced by cold, conditioned air that smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper. The inside of First Sovereign Trust felt like a cathedral built for money. The ceiling stretched 3 stories high, detailed with gold. Trim and murals of hard-working figures frozen in time. The marble floor was black and white, polished to a shine that echoed sharply under Bumpy's shoes. Brass railings glimmered beneath hanging chandeliers. Bumpy moved toward the teller-line dot as he walked deeper into the bank. The mood shifted. The respectful hush tightened into something watchful. Heads turned. Wealthy women in fur wraps, despite the heat, stopped their conversations. Businessmen checking their watches paused and stared. Hands pulled purses closer. Briefcases slid nearer to legs. Security guards at the corners shifted their weight, their hands drifting toward their belts. Bumpy ignored them all. He was used to it. He had spent his life entering rooms where he wasn't expected, where his presence alone made people uncomfortable. He kept his head high, his face calm, his pace unhurried. He took his place in line behind a woman wearing a fox fur stole. She sensed him, turned slightly, saw him, and stepped away without a word. Wrinkling her nose as if he carried something unpleasant, Bumpy didn't react. He stared straight ahead at the teller windows. He had learned patience the hard way. He could wait as long as necessary. Eventually, the line moved. The woman finished her business and hurried off without looking back. It was his turn. Bumpy stepped up to the marble counter. The teller's brass nameplate read Mrs. Higgins. She looked like a woman carved from granite and disapproval. Middle-aged, with stiff gray hair sprayed into place, her face was tight, her mouth permanently pinched. She wore glasses on a chain and a pearl necklace pulled snug around her neck. She was stamping paperwork, the dull thump of the rubber stamp echoing in the quiet room. She didn't look up. "Next," she said, her voice sharp and nasal. "Good afternoon," Bumpy said calmly, setting his briefcase down. Mrs. Higgins froze mid-stamp. She looked up, eyes widening slightly behind thick lenses as she took in the black man standing at her window. Her gaze slid over him, not meeting his eyes. She inspected his suit, his tie, his hat, searching for a flaw. A stain, a loose thread. Anything to confirm what she already believed. When she found nothing, when she saw his suit was better tailored than most men in the room, her expression tightened further. "Can I help you?" she asked. It wasn't an offer. It was a challenge. Bumpy reached into his jacket and removed a finely bound checkbook, placing it on the cool marble. He took out a gold fountain pen and began to write. The date flowed neatly onto the line. He wrote cash. In the amount box, he clearly wrote $25,000. He signed his name with care. Ellsworth B. Johnson. He capped the pen, slid the check under the brass divider, and looked up. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," he said smoothly. "Small bills, if possible, 10s and 20s. I have contractors to pay." Mrs. Higgins stared at the check. She didn't touch it. Her eyes fixed on the number. $25,000. She blinked, looked at him, looked back at the check. In her world, a man like him might cash $50, maybe $100 on a good day, but this? A slow, unpleasant smile spread across her face. Not friendly. Not curious. It was a smile of disbelief and quiet mockery. "Is this a joke?" Mrs. Higgins asked. Her voice carried far enough that people in the next line stopped whispering and began to listen. "I assure you." "Ma'am, I don't joke about money," Bumpy replied evenly, though a small muscle jumped along his jaw. Mrs. Higgins lifted the check using only the very corner, pinched between two fingers as if it carried something infectious. She held it up toward the light, studied it briefly, and then laughed. The sound was sharp and harsh, the kind that scraped against the ears. $25,000, she said, shaking her head and staring at him with open contempt. "Who exactly are you trying to fool? Did you pull this checkbook out of the trash, or did you steal it from your boss?" The air inside the bank seemed to disappear. The silence became complete. Even the hum of the air conditioning sounded loud. Every eye in the room was fixed on them. The guard near the entrance took a slow step forward. Bumpy felt the heat rise in his chest. It was a familiar fire, one he had spent years learning to keep under control. It carried the weight of countless small insults, quiet dismissals, and public humiliations. For a brief moment, he imagined reaching through the brass bars, grabbing her stiff collar, and slamming her face into the marble counter. He didn't move. His hands stayed flat on the counter. "That is my checkbook," Bumpy said, his voice dropping lower, slower, heavier. "That is my signature, and that is my money. I suggest you check the ledger." "I don't need to check anything," Mrs. Higgins scoffed, dropping the check back onto the counter. "I've worked at this bank for 20 years. I know what money looks like, and I know people like you don't have $25,000. That's more than I made in 5 years." She leaned back slightly. "You expect me to believe you earned this? Doing what? Shining shoes?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," Bumpy said calmly. "I expect you to do your job. Check the account. Blue Ridge Realty." "I'm not wasting my time looking up fake accounts for con artists," Mrs. Higgins snapped. Her face was flushing red. "You come in here dressed like a gentleman, thinking you can rob us with a piece of paper. It's insulting." "Check the account," Bumpy said again. Each word deliberate, firmed out. Mrs. Higgins narrowed her eyes. "You want me to check it?" she said coldly. "Fine, I'll check it." She didn't reach for any ledgers. She didn't open a book or turn toward the files. Instead, she locked eyes with Bumpy, her expression hard and deliberate. Her hands moved to the check. Rip. The sound tore through the quiet room. She ripped the check in half. Bumpy watched without blinking. She stacked the halves together and ripped them again. Rip. She crushed the pieces into a ball and dropped them into the wastebasket beneath her counter. "There," she said, brushing her hands together. "Account checked. Insufficient funds. Now get out before I press the silent alarm." Bumpy stood still. He looked at the wastebasket. Then he looked at her. The audacity of it took his breath for a moment. This wasn't just a refusal. It was destruction. It was a statement that he didn't exist, that his money didn't exist, that nothing connected to him was real. "You shouldn't have done that," Bumpy said quietly. "I'm calling the manager." Mrs. Higgins shrieked, her voice climbing higher. She slammed a button beneath the counter. "Security! Security!" From the glass-walled office at the back of the bank, a man hurried out. He was tall and thin, with slicked-back hair and a pinstripe suit that looked expensive but didn't quite fit. He walked with the quick, self-important stride of a man who enjoyed his small authority a little too much. This was Mr. Whitmore. 2 uniformed guards followed close behind him, hands resting near their batons. "What is the meaning of this?" Whitmore demanded, taking in the scene. His eyes went straight to Mrs. Higgins. "Mr. Whitmore," she cried instantly, slipping into practiced victimhood. "This man tried to pass bad checks. He tried to steal $25,000. And when I refused, he started threatening me." Whitmore turned to Bumpy. His expression was already set. He saw a black man standing in his lobby, and his decision had been made. "Is this true?" Whitmore asked. "Your teller didn't check the account," Bumpy said calmly. "She destroyed a legal check." "I have an account here. Blue Ridge Realty." "I don't care what you claim," Whitmore interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "You are causing a disturbance. You're upsetting my customers." He gestured toward the line of pale, nervous faces watching. "I am a customer," Bumpy said. "I trusted this institution with my money." "Not anymore," Whitmore sneered, looking him up and down. "We don't want your kind of business here. We serve respectable people, not hustlers who think a suit makes them equal." He turned to the guards. "Escort him out. If he resists, call the police and ban him from the premises." The guards stepped forward. Big men, solid, hands heavy on their belts. "Let's go," one of them said, stepping into Bumpy's space. "Don't make it worse." Bumpy looked at Whitmore and committed his face to memory. The shape of his nose, the color of his tie, the way his mouth curled. Then he glanced at Mrs. Higgins, who watched from behind her glass and brass with a quiet, satisfied smile. "You're making a mistake," Bumpy said. "The only mistake was letting you walk in," Whitmore replied. "Get him out," Bumpy didn't. "Allow the guards to touch him." He straightened his coat. He lifted his. briefcase, and he turned toward the door. He walked out slowly, calmly, his steps measured, his head high. Moving as if the floor beneath him still belonged to him, he picked up his briefcase. He turned with the kind of precision learned over a lifetime of discipline and walked toward the exit. He moved slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't lower his head. He walked as if the floor beneath his feet still belonged to him. Each step echoed through the quiet bank. He pushed through the revolving doors and stepped back into the heat of Fifth Avenue. Moments later, he was inside the Lincoln. Junie took one look at him and understood. He saw the tight line of Bumpy's jaw, the vein pulsing at his temple. The darkness settled behind his eyes. What happened? Junie asked quietly. She tore it up, Bumpy said, staring straight. Through the windshield. She laughed first. Then she tore it up. She what? Junie's hands clenched around the steering wheel until the leather creaked. She tore up a $25,000 check? The manager threw me out, Bumpy said. Whitmore said they don't serve my kind. Called security. Junie reached beneath the seat. Bumpy heard the unmistakable metallic sound of something heavy shifting. I'll burn it down, Junie said, his voice shaking. I'll walk back in there right now. I'll drag that manager out by his ankles. I'll teach him some manners. I'll burn the whole place to the ground. No, Bumpy said calmly. Boss, you can't let that stand, Junie snapped. Not downtown, not anywhere. If people hear about this, put it away, Junie, Bumpy said. Juny hesitated. I said put it away, Bumpy repeated, sharper now. Junie froze, breathing hard, eyes locked on the bank entrance. Slowly, unwillingly, he let go of the weapon and placed both hands back on the wheel. Bumpy exhaled. He lit a cigar, his fingers shaking slightly, not from fear, but from restraint. He drew in smoke and let it fill the car. We're not burning the bank, Bumpy said. Fire is easy. Fire gets insurance checks. Insurance doesn't cover humiliation. So what do we do? Junie asked. We don't take it, Bumpy said. A cold light entered his eyes. We take over. How? Drive to Mr. Levy's office, Bumpy said. I need a lawyer, and I need a phone. Mr. Levy worked out of a brownstone in Greenwich Village. He had been Bumpy's attorney for 20 years. A small man with wild white hair, thick glasses, and a mind that never missed a detail. He didn't care about Bumpy's past. He cared about leverage. When Bumpy and Junie entered, Levy was buried in paperwork. The room smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. He looked up, saw Bumpy's face, and pushed everything aside. Ellsworth, Levy said. You look like a man trying very hard not to commit a crime. I am, Bumpy replied, sitting across from him. I need information. First Sovereign Trust, Fifth Avenue branch. Levy removed his glasses and rubbed his nose. Why would you open an account there? I tried to withdraw from it today, Bumpy said. There was an incident. He explained everything. The check, the laughter, the tearing, the manager. Levy listened carefully, his expression darkening. That's actionable, he said. Discrimination. Destruction of property. I don't have years, Bumpy replied. I have a contractor waiting today, and I have an insult that needs an answer today. I want their weakness. Levy leaned back, tapping his pen. First Sovereign is old money, but the street talk isn't good. Bad real estate in New Jersey. Land they thought was gold. So they're hurting, Bumpy said. They're bleeding, Levy corrected. Assets without liquidity. And the Federal Reserve is auditing mid-sized banks this week. Explain. If they fail a liquidity audit, Levy said, meaning, they don't have enough physical cash on hand. The Fed shut them down. Assets frozen. Management fired. Stock wiped out. Bumpy smiled, slow, controlled. So if someone deposited a very large amount of cash today, Bumpy said, say $1,000,000 into that branch, it would save them. Levy paused, did the math. Yes, a deposit like that would be a lifeline. They'd do anything for a depositor like that. And if that depositor demanded control? Bumpy asked. Board seat. Operational authority. Levy let out a dry laugh. For $1,000,000 in cash today, they'd rename the building after you. Get the paperwork ready, Bumpy said, standing. Silent partner. Full operational control. Hiring and firing authority. Ironclad. Levy checked his watch. Where are you getting $1,000,000 in cash in 3 hours? Banks are closing. I'm not going to a bank, Bumpy said. I'm going to the Italians. Bumpy and... Junie left the lawyer's office and headed uptown, driving toward a social club tucked away in East Harlem. This was Genevieve's territory. The windows were painted black. The door was solid steel, built to keep problems outside. Bumpy walked in. Without hesitation, the room fell quiet. Men at the card table stopped talking mid-sentence. Hands paused over chips. Everyone knew who he was. They respected him. But a black man walking unannounced into an Italian social club always carried tension with it. Bumpy didn't slow down. He walked straight toward the back room. Fat Tony sat there, working on a plate of manicotti, a napkin tucked neatly into his collar. He looked up, surprised, then smiled. Bumpy, Tony said, wiping his mouth. To what do I owe the visit? You here to talk peace on the Harlem numbers? I'm here for a loan, Bumpy said. Short term. 24 hours. Tony's fork paused. How much? $1,000,000, Bumpy said. Tony choked. He coughed hard, grabbed his wine, swallowed, then stared. $1,000,000 in cash? Tony said, What are you buying, Bumpy? Respect, Bumpy replied. I'll pay you back tomorrow. 10%, 1 day. Tony leaned back. 10% on $1,000,000 for 1 day was easy money. $100,000 overnight. And Bumpy Johnson always paid. If you didn't, it meant war. And no one wanted that. You got collateral? Tony asked. Harlem, Bumpy said. My territory. You do this, and the numbers run clean for a year. No disputes, no noise. You have my word. Tony studied his eyes. He saw resolve there. No bluff. All right, Tony said, but I need it in small bills. It'll take about an hour to pull it together. I'll wait, Bumpy said. An hour later, Junie opened the trunk of the Lincoln in the alley behind the club. 2 Genovese soldiers lifted 4 heavy canvas duffel bags and dropped them inside. Each one hit the metal floor with a dull thud. They were packed with cash, 10s and 20s. Crumpled, worn, smelling of smoke and sweat. Street money. The lifeblood of the underworld. That's a lot of paper, boss, Junie said quietly. You sure about this? We won't get pulled over, Bumpy said. Close the trunk. They drove back toward Midtown as the clock crept closer to 4. Traffic thickened. Offices were emptying. Banks were preparing to close. Bumpy checked. His watch. Pull around back. Loading dock. We're not using the front door? Junie asked. Owners don't, Bumpy said. Owners use the door that controls the money. Bumpy picked up the car phone, still a rarity in 1964, and dialed. Saul, he said, call the regional director. Not the branch manager. Tell him Blue Ridge Realty can solve his liquidity problem right now. Tell him the cash is at the loading dock. And tell him I have conditions. Bumpy listened as Levi relayed the message. He could hear the shift in tone on the other end of the line. Fear turning into hope. Yes, Bumpy said. Tell him I want full personnel control of the 5th Avenue. Branch effective immediately. Tell him Mr. Whitmore answers to me. Or the car drives away, and the feds shut him down tomorrow morning. He hung up and looked at Juny. The anger was gone now. In its place was focus. Cold. Sharp. Get the bags, Bumpy said. It's time. The loading dock behind First Sovereign Trust was nothing like the marble and gold inside. It was bare. Concrete, stained with oil, thick with diesel fumes and the sour smell of garbage. The heat turned the alley into a humid tunnel. Bumpy stood beside the open trunk, looking at the 4 canvas bags. Ordinary, stained, unimpressive. Inside them sat $1 million in small bills. Money earned in back rooms, clubs, and street corners. Dirty money about to clean a white institution. Juny stood against the brick wall, watching the alley entrance, hand near his waistband. $1 million in cash attracted attention. Even for Bumpy Johnson. They're late, Juny muttered. They're hesitating, Bumpy said. They're deciding whether survival is worth swallowing pride. Right on cue, the heavy steel door creaked open. 2 men stepped out. One was a guard, nervous hand on his holster. The other wore an expensive suit and the face of a man under pressure. Silver hair, flushed skin. This was Mr. Vance, the regional director. He looked at the alley, the trash, the men by the car. He hesitated before stepping onto the concrete. Mr. Johnson? Vance asked. Mr. Vance, Bumpy replied. He nodded toward the trunk. Your problem is solved. Vance stepped closer and unzipped one of the bags. Inside were stacks of worn bills held together with rubber bands. My God, he whispered. It's all here. 1 million, Bumpy said. You can count it, but you don't have time. The auditors arrive at 8 tomorrow morning. Vance wiped his lip. Mr. Levi mentioned conditions. I want a partnership, Bumpy said. Silent. Blue Ridge Realty becomes a preferred investor. And I want full operational oversight of this branch. He paused. Starting now. I want the authority to review personnel, Bumpy said. I want the authority to make sure my interests are treated with respect. Vance swallowed. He was an old-school banker, the kind of man who belonged to private clubs with quiet rules about who was allowed inside. Taking money from a Harlem gangster violated every instinct he had. But then he thought about the federal auditors. He pictured padlocks on the doors, headlines announcing failure, his family name dragged through public disgrace. Personnel authority, Vance said carefully. You mean hiring and firing? I mean, I don't tolerate rude employees, Bumpy replied. And I don't tolerate incompetent managers. If I'm keeping this ship afloat, I want to make sure the crew knows how to sail it. Vance looked again at the open trunk, at the money. It wasn't just cash. It was survival. Agreed, Vance said at last. We'll sign upstairs, but the funds need to be secured immediately. They must be logged before close of business. Juny, Bumpy said. Bring the bags. Juny stepped forward and lifted 2 duffel bags in each hand as if they weighed nothing. The muscles in his neck tightened, a quiet show of strength that made the nearby guard instinctively step back. Lead the way, Bumpy said. They moved through the service entrance, leaving behind the heat of the alley and entering the cold fluorescent corridors beneath the bank. This was the side customers never saw. Concrete walls, armored doors, steel cages. The air smelled of metal and old coffee. They took the freight elevator up. The silence inside was heavy. Vance stared at the glowing floor numbers, forcing himself to breathe. Bumpy stood calmly, a faint smile touching his face. He was already inside the fortress. The doors opened on the executive floor above the public lobby. Vance led them down a quiet hallway to a large office framed by mahogany doors. A frightened secretary looked up as they entered. Get the acquisition papers Mr. Levi sent, Vance snapped. And get the notary, now. For the next 20 minutes, Bumpy Johnson sat in a leather chair and signed his name. He signed as director of Blue Ridge Realty. He signed disclosures. He signed deposit records. With every signature, he stitched himself deeper into the structure of the institution that had rejected him only hours earlier. Vance watched, pale and silent, like a man surrendering something precious. When the last page was signed, Vance pressed the bank seal onto the documents. "It's done," he said, his voice unsteady. "The funds are deposited. The equity transfer is active. You now hold controlling operational interest in this branch." Bumpy stood and buttoned his jacket. "Good," he said. "Now I'd like to inspect my investment." "Inspect?" Vance asked. "I want to see the lobby," Bumpy said. "I want to see the vault, and I want a word with the branch manager." Vance hesitated. "Mr. Whitmore? Is that really necessary?" "Administrative matters can be handled here." "Mr. Whitmore had me removed 2 hours ago," Bumpy said calmly. "I think it's polite I inform him I'm back." Vance met Bumpy's eyes and understood there was no discussion left. "Very well," he said. "I'll escort you." They took the main elevator down. Junie stayed behind, standing guard outside the executive office, arms crossed. UNMOVING. The elevator doors opened into the secure area behind the teller line. The bank was closing. Guards locked the front doors. The sign flipped to closed. Tellers counted drawers. Everything moved in quiet routine. Then Bumpy Johnson stepped onto the floor. He walked beside the regional director through the employees' workspace. The tellers froze. A black man in a tailored suit moving freely behind the counter beside corporate authority didn't make sense to them. Mrs. Higgins looked up from counting bills. Her face was drained of color. She dropped the money. It scattered across the counter. Her hand flew to her mouth. In her mind, this was an invasion. "He's back," she screamed, stumbling away. "Security! He's got a gun!" Panic ripped through the room. Guards spun toward the noise, hands flying to holsters. In the glass office, Whitmore dropped his phone and ran out. "Hold it!" Vance shouted. "Stand down! Everyone stand down!" The guards froze confused. They stared at their regional director standing calmly beside the man they had been told was dangerous. Whitmore rushed forward, flushed and breathless. "Mr. Vance, thank God," he said. "That's him. The hustler. He broke in. Arrest him." Silence. Vance snapped. Whitmore stopped cold. He looked from Vance to Bumpy, stunned. "Double quote, sir. This man was removed earlier," Whitmore said weakly. "He caused a disturbance." Bumpy stepped forward. He still didn't look at Whitmore. He slowly looked around the lobby. He took in the high ceilings, the gold leaf details, the polished marble floors. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigar. "You can't smoke in here." Whitmore did out on instinct. Bumpy lit the cigar anyway. The flame flared bright in the dimming light of the bank. He took a long, unhurried pull and released a thick cloud of blue smoke that drifted upward toward the vents. "Mr. Vance," Bumpy said, the cigar resting between his teeth. "Introduce me." Vance looked like he wished the floor would open and swallow him. He cleared his throat and turned toward his staff. The tellers, guards, and managers stared back in stunned silence. "This is Mr. Ellsworth Johnson," Vance said, his voice hollow. "He represents Blue Ridge Realty. As of 20 minutes ago, Blue Ridge Realty is the majority investor in this branch. Mr. Johnson saved this bank from insolvency." Whitmore's mouth opened, but no words came out. He stood there frozen, like a man pulled out of water. Insolvency? He finally managed. But he tried to pass a bad. "He's my boss," Bumpy said calmly, cutting him off. Bumpy stepped closer. Whitmore instinctively leaned back, the smell of cigar smoke filling his space. 2 hours ago, Bumpy said quietly, I walked into this bank as a customer. I trusted you with my business. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong on your marble floor. You decided my money wasn't real because of the color of my skin. I was following protocol, Whitmore stammered. Suspicious activity. Guidelines, your protocol is expensive, Bumpy replied. It almost cost this bank a $1 million deposit. Whitmore's hands were shaking now. If I were a small man, Bumpy continued, I would have walked away. I would have let the federal auditors shut these doors tomorrow morning. I would have let you lose your job, your pension, and your name. Whitmore swallowed hard. But I'm not a small man, Bumpy said. I'm a businessman. And in business, you cut dead weight. Bumpy turned away from Whitmore and walked slowly down the teller line. The young tellers pressed themselves back against the wall as he passed. He stopped at station number 4. Mrs. Higgins stood there trembling. She looked small now, exposed. The confidence the counter once gave her was gone. Bumpy glanced at the trash can beneath her counter. Mr. Whitmore, Bumpy said without turning around. Come here. Whitmore approached, pale and unsteady. Look in the trash, Bumpy said. What? Whitmore asked weakly. Look in the trash. Bumpy repeated. Whitmore knelt and reached into the metal bin. Pick it up, Bumpy said. Whitmore pulled out the crumpled paper and slowly unfolded it. Torn pieces of the check lay in his hands. That, Bumpy said, pointing, is a legal financial instrument. Your employee destroyed client property. And she laughed while doing it. Bumpy leaned forward over the counter, bringing his face level with Mrs. Higgins. She flinched and turned away. Look at me, Bumpy said. She slowly met his eyes. There was no superiority left in hers. Only fear. You said it would take you 5 years to make $25,000. Bumpy said softly. Mrs. Higgins blinked, tears spilling over. You were wrong, Bumpy continued. You won't make it in 5 years. You won't make it at all. She gasped. My pension. I have 3 years until retirement. You should have thought about that before you decided to judge me, Bumpy said. You judged me. Now I'm judging you. He paused. You're fired. Mrs. Higgins turned desperately to Whitmore. Please, you can't let this happen. I've been here 20 years. Whitmore looked at Bumpy, then at Vance, who stared at the ceiling, refusing to intervene. Whitmore understood what survival required. Pack your things, Whitmore whispered. What? She cried. Pack your box. Whitmore shouted, fear. Turning to anger. You violated policy. You destroyed a check. Get out. Mrs. Higgins broke down, sobbing loudly. She grabbed her purse, a framed photo, office supplies, stuffing them into a cardboard box with shaking hands. It was a messy, humiliating end to a career built on small power. Security. Bumpy said. The 2 guards stepped forward hesitantly. Escort her out, Bumpy ordered. The same way you escorted me. The guards looked at Whitmore. He nodded. Quickly. 1 guard took her arm. Come on, ma'am. Don't make this worse. I gave my life to this place, she cried as they led her away. It's not fair. Bumpy watched her disappear through the employee exit. He said nothing. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He didn't enjoy it. He simply watched as consequences settled where they belonged. When the door closed behind her, the bank fell quiet again. The kind of quiet that comes after something final. Bumpy turned back toward Whitmore. Now, Bumpy said calmly, about my withdrawal. Yes, sir, Whitmore replied quickly, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Of course, immediately. I'll open the main vault myself. How much? Whitmore asked. 25,000, Bumpy said. Small bills. Like, I asked earlier. Right away, Whitmore said, already moving. He nearly ran toward the vault. Bumpy turned to the young teller at the next station. She couldn't have been more than 20. Red hair, freckles, hands shaking as she stood there. What's your name? Bumpy asked gently. Sarah, she whispered. Sarah Miller, sir. Bumpy reached into his pocket and took out his checkbook. He wrote a new check, clean and steady, and slid it across the counter. Sarah, I'm going to need you to process this when Mr. Whitmore brings the cash. Can you do that? Yes, sir. She squeaked, got double quotes, and Sarah, Bumpy added. Yes? Don't ever judge a man by how he looks, Bumpy said. You treat everyone who walks through that door with respect. You understand? Yes, sir. She said quickly, I promise. Whitmore returned moments later, breathing hard, carrying a thick canvas bag. He set it on the counter and unzipped it, revealing stacks of cash. It's all there, Mr. Johnson, Whitmore said. 25,000. Would you like to count it? I trust you can count, Bumpy replied evenly. Considering your job depends on it. Bumpy picked up the bag. He didn't say thank you. He turned to Vance. We have an understanding, Bumpy said. Blue Ridge Realty expects quarterly reports, and I expect this branch to remain spotless. No complaints. Understood, Vance said, looking like he needed a drink he wasn't allowed to have yet. We appreciate your investment. Bumpy walked toward the front doors. The security guard who had threatened him earlier stood there holding the door open. He avoided Bumpy's eyes. Bumpy stopped. He reached into his coat, pulled out his wallet, and removed a crisp $100 bill. He tucked it neatly into the guard's breast pocket. Buy yourself a new pair of glasses, Bumpy said. Might help you see clearly who you're talking to next time. He stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. The heat was still there, thick and heavy, but Bumpy didn't feel it. He felt calm. He walked down the steps toward the waiting Lincoln. Junie stood by the open door, grinning. I saw the lady crying, Junie said as Bumpy got in. Looked like she lost her best friend. She lost her pension, Bumpy replied, tossing the bag onto the seat. Drive. We've got a contractor to pay. The Lincoln eased into traffic. So, Junie said, glancing in the mirror, you own a bank now? We own a piece of one, Bumpy said. Enough to keep them honest. Enough to make sure the next black man who walks in gets a greeting instead of a threat. That's an expensive lesson, Junie said. Racism usually is, Bumpy replied. It costs money. It costs talent. And if you choose the wrong man, it can cost you the whole bank. They crossed back over 110th Street into Harlem. The air changed. The sound changed. Bumpy rolled the window down and let the neighborhood wash over him. They pulled up to the construction site on 118th Street at 4:55 p.m. Mr. Henderson was pacing the sidewalk. When he saw the Lincoln, his shoulders dropped in relief. Bumpy stepped out, carrying the bag. The suppliers? Bumpy asked. They're waiting, Henderson said. Trucks are loaded. Just need the word. Bumpy handed him the bag. Make the call. Henderson opened it, stared inside, then looked up at Bumpy like he was seeing him for the first time. Mr. Johnson, he said, almost in disbelief. I don't know how you pulled this off on a Tuesday afternoon. I made a withdrawal. Bumpy said simply, get to work. I want those floors down by Friday. Bumpy got back into the car. The weight on his chest was gone. He hadn't used a gun. He hadn't broken a bone. He had used the system against itself. Home, boss? Junie asked. Home, Bumpy said. As the car moved through the streets, Bumpy closed his eyes. He thought about the woman carrying a cardboard box. He thought about the manager sweating through his suit. He thought about $1 million of dirty money now sitting in a spotless vault. Keeping the lights on. It was a strange world. The people who claimed to be clean survived on dirty fuel. And the man they called a criminal was the only one who kept his word. Bumpy smiled in the darkness of the car dot. It had been a good day. A very good day.